President of Aligarh Muslim Teachers Association, Khalid Sahab, my dear friend Faizan Sahab, Dada Sahab, Siddiqui Sahab, Joint Secretary Sahab, members of the Executive Committee of Aligarh Muslim University Academic Council, teachers, students. I cannot possibly express my gratitude for the overwhelming response that I have received amidst my own people. We are all citizens of India, and I believe that that's our only identity. Everything comes later. Which religion I belong to, what I do in my personal life, which region I belong to, which state I live in, has nothing to do with the fundamental basis of the Indian Constitution. That is citizenship. And these rights as a citizen were given to everybody who was in India when the Constitution was framed and we became a republic on the 26th of January, 1950. And the Constitution really was ultimately a compromise. It was a compromise of historical currents that were flowing prior to the Constitution. Everybody had to come together. Communities had to come together, castes, creeds, religious majorities, minorities had to come together. And we had been marauded by the British, we had been exploited by the British. They left us penniless, they left us homeless in a sense that they exploited our economic resources to such an extent that we had to start building a nation. And in that journey, we had to be all together. And the Constitution represented the principles and the parameters on the basis of which we would undertake this great journey of India. And if you look at the Constitution, you realize that as far as the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, as far as the backward classes were concerned, they were given some entrenched rights. Entrenched rights under Article 15, Article 16 of the Constitution, Article 15 in relation to education, Article 16 in relation to employment. But because those rights were given based on caste, those could not be conferred on the minority community. Whether it was a Christian minority or other minority, the Muslim minority. And because the Muslim minority was a sizable part of our population, and the Constituent Assembly debates reflected the concern of that section of the community to their own future, naturally they had to be given some sort of assurance. And that's how we got the birth of Article 19, Article 29, Article 29, Article 30, Article 25, Article 26, Article 27, 28. And it is in that sense that we realize that this was part of the fundamental rights of citizens of India, that they belong to X, Y, or Z community. That's why it was put in the chapter of fundamental rights. I can share with you this fact that ever since I started practice 52 years ago, I have never appeared on the other side. Because whenever there is an invasion on the rights of a citizen, he may belong to any community, I have always stood by the citizen. So when Faizan Saab came to me and said that let's do this case, there's no way I could refuse it. And I can share one fact with you, that but for him we would not have won this case. The meticulous briefing, the history of the institution, how this institution was formed way back, and the historical perspectives that were necessary to be placed before the court. And Sir Sayyid's great journey from 1869 onwards, how ultimately a college was set up and how it was necessary under the imperial rule, if we had to become a university, we naturally there was no other choice except to become a university and give degrees to our children who could then be employed. And then came our constitution, and one of the quintessential questions that arose in the case was when the constitution comes into being, does a minority institution lose its status as a minority institution? That was one of the issues that was debated at great length in the Supreme Court of India. And the court decided in our favor that once a minority institution is said to have been founded by members of the minority community, then that minority institution is recognized by the Constitution and doesn't lose its status. So that, in a sense, was a great victory. I won't go into the boring details and the legal arguments because that's not necessary. But then the other question that arose, which was also very, very important, that if you look at Article 30 of the Constitution, it says that all minorities based on religion or language have the right to establish and administer educational institutions by their choice, of their choice. So the question arose that, right, if you say that the AMU was founded prior to the Constitution, was recognized by the Constitution as a minority institution when the Constitution came into being, but if you do not satisfy the test of establishment and administration, you will not be considered to be a minority institution. And in that sense, Basha's case had decided the other way, namely that it was neither established by the minority institution because it became a university, and it was not administered by the minority. So both tests were decided against us. So we had to overcome this Herculean task of trying to convince the court that the word establish and administration are not conjunctive but disjunctive. In other words, what was held in the past and what several high courts have held, that if you have established it and you are not administering it, in other words, the minority is not administering the institution, then you lose your status under Article 30. And the fact is that as far as the administration is concerned, there is nothing to show that it was to be administered by the Muslim community. That is presently the situation today. So we had to overcome this Herculean task of convincing the court that in fact this is disjunctive because it is governed by the word choice. Establish and administer educational institutions of your choice. So you set up a minority, you set up the foundations of a minority institution of your choice. And you have the choice to administer it yourself, and you have the choice to allow somebody else to administer it. And that's a matter of choice, and the fundamental of any educational institution belonging to the minority is a matter of choice. to set up is my choice. What kind of courses in which I would teach my students is my choice. What kind of faculty I would recruit is my choice. Except that I will have to comply with standards set up for the purposes of the quality of education which is regulated by law. The quality of any educational institution is regulated by law, whether it's by the majority or the minority. You will have said that if you cannot recruit a teacher without a PhD in the medical course, that's a matter of regulation. That doesn't come into the matter of choice. The choice is I can have a medical degree, I can grant a medical degree, but who are the teachers, what qualifications they have is regulated by law, because that is a matter which is fundamental to the quality of the student who actually moves out of the university once he completes his education and tries to get a job. So the regulation of quality standards, either by the university or otherwise, is not a matter of choice. But it is my decision that I want to give some administrative control to some other authority is a matter of choice. Because that's nothing to do with standards. And Supreme Court has held in several judgments that even a minority institution has no right to mismanage the institution. They have the right to manage the institution. They can't maladminister the institution. They have the right to administer the institution. So ultimately, and luckily for us, the court bought that argument and said this is disjunctive. You have the choice to have whosoever you want the institution to be administered by, and the kind of institution you want to set up. And Vedanta, may I tell you this, there is nothing left in the case now. We'll have to win this case. There are no ambiguities, there are no loopholes. The principles have been clearly laid down in this judgment. We had a discussion on that issue while we were traveling here together from New Delhi. And I explained to the extent I could, because he's a master of the law. But this is what the judgment says, and there is no other way. So therefore, these two hurdles were there. The third hurdle was that, look, when the institution became a university and incorporated under the Imperial Act, then obviously you lose your status as a minority institution, because then you are governed by the Act. Because the Act incorporates the university. And in incorporation of a university under an Act results in losing your minority character. So then we had to make a distinction that incorporation of a university is a matter of law. The founding of a university is not a matter of law, that's a matter of fact. So we won that argument. And we said to the court that, look, there are so many universities, state universities, which are minority institutions, which are recognized even today as minority institutions in several states, which are regulated and are incorporated under a statute, yet they are minority institutions. Will you render a judgment to in fact decide that all those institutions are not minority institutions merely because the state has incorporated? So we succeeded in that. So there were several hurdles to be crossed. You don't reach Everest till you deal with the climate on the way. So we dealt with that climate, and we dealt with it in a manner that was logical. And luckily, and I have to say luckily, because it's a 4-2 decision, actually, the fifth judge is neither against us nor for us. So there is still the feeling within the judiciary that the secular character of our country has to be protected. Because these are difficult times, very difficult times, and I'll come to that a little later. But let me talk about what you asked me to speak on. I talked about the journey as far as the Aligarh Muslim University is concerned. But let's talk about, educational rights and cultural rights. as far as scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and backward communities are concerned, that they are allowed to be set up by the state, by private individuals, but they get aid from the government. Now, as far as minorities are concerned, when you set up an institution, you don't get aid from the government. There's no right to get aid from the government. So the problem with minorities in India, and we talk about educational rights, is that very few institutions, educational institutions are set up because people don't have the wherewithal and the resources to set up those institutions. And the consequence is that if you look at the numbers in terms of the gross enrollment ratio in school, in higher secondary, in secondary education, you will see that most of the numbers suggest that the Muslim community is even below the scheduled tribes and the scheduled castes. In other words, as you move up the ladder from secondary to higher secondary to university, your numbers at the level of the university are even below the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes. Now that's a very serious situation. And the reason for that is that whereas you got protection under Article 30 to set up an institution, it was difficult for the minority community, and it is difficult for the minority community to set up institutions. And so unless you deal with that issue as a community, you'll not be able to move forward. So it's time that the community looks inwards, decides for itself that the only way for empowerment, the only way for a citizen to raise his head high and be counted is to be educated. So as you move forward in this new journey, and I say new journey because you've not done it in the past, and please take the lead, Aligarh Muslim University. Please take the lead. As you move forward in this new journey, make sure your tools, make sure that you collect money, and people have done it in Kerala, but you've not done it in this part of the world. Please make sure that they do that. Then you don't need the state, you don't need a lawyer, you can stand on your feet. The other problem with minority institutions is that, and this is not something that I have really understood. According to me, all institutions are alike. All educational institutions are alike. Why do we call it minority institutions? All institutions belonging to the majority community or the minority community is entitled to set up an educational institution of its choice. Nothing wrong with it. But we think that if we do something for the minority, it is as if we are doing something special for the minority, which the majority cannot do. Which is just the opposite. You do nothing special. In fact, majority community has the advantage of state aid, which at this level you will get aid, but at other levels you won't get it. So in a sense, this right that was given to you under Article 30 is an inchoate right. It's not complete. It's not a right which empowers your children to move forward in life, because you don't have the resources. And if you set up an educational institution, you set up a medical institution, it costs crores and crores and crores of rupees. Nobody has that kind of funding. This is the biggest problem that the Muslim community faces in this country. So, and I think that the other thing that we should do as a community, and this is not just for the minorities, it is for all communities, is that the world is changing. There is a paradigm shift. It's like the new, if you remember the Industrial Revolution that took place in the 19th century. That Industrial Revolution brought about a complete economic shift in the way in which people work and the way in which people move, and technology was at the heart of it. And I remember when the Industrial Revolution took place, London was one of the most polluted cities in the world. It took about several years to get rid of pollution in London. Because every technological revolution brings with it certain dangers. And we are now in the midst of a new technology revolution. The world of AI, artificial intelligence, the world of robotics, and a world in which the digital economy will control the world. These American corporations, with their algorithms, can determine the way you think, the way you act. And this is very dangerous for all of us. And India as a nation is not even ready with it. So instead of the government and all of us looking at these issues as to how actually to confront the new world, the coming of the new age, the new technological revolution which will change our lives, we're looking at issues which are irrelevant. किसने क्या खाया, किसने क्या पहना, किसकी इम्पीचमेंट हो रही है, किसकी नहीं हो रही. How is that relevant to the future of India? It has no relevance. Talk about these issues. Your leaders should talk about these issues. Love jihad. How is that relevant to the future of India? Flood jihad. How is that relevant to the future of India? Places of worship act. Sambal. How is it relevant to the future of India? It has no relationship to the future of India. When politics of the day sidelines the economic ambitions of the nation, that nation can never be strong. But in this country, it's the other way around. And that's a very sad state of affairs. Since 2014, I, as a citizen of this country, and I really have no allegiance to A, B, or C. My allegiance is to the Constitution. As a citizen of this country, I get worried. And I share something with you that I'm worried about. Because that's the history of our country. The 19th Citizenship Act, CAA. What has it got to do with future of India? Leaf bands and cow vigilantism. How will it empower us? Anti-conversion laws. The revocation of Article 370. All political. Hate speech and communal rhetoric. Demolition of Muslim properties. Sambal violence. Waqf amendment bill. Police encounters. Bulldozer justice. Display of names on eateries. Implementation of UCC. Surge in anti-Muslim hate speech. Stoic silence on Manipur. I can go on and on and on and on. What has this got to do with the future of my country? Nothing. The future of my country depends on how young students out there empower themselves and move into the mainstream of the global community and show how great they are. That's the first task of a nation, the fundamental task of a nation. And I can tell you this, if you really look at the history of the world, it is the history, all those countries where education is of the highest standards are leading the world. give you a little figure. If you look at R&D investment in the United States of America, it is $650 billion a year. $650 billion. If you see China's investment in R&D, it is over $500 billion. That's why it is where they are. And what is our investment? 50 billion. And what's our population? 140 crores. How do you want? How can you ever expect you to be a great nation if you don't invest? And all countries who have actually, Britain had universal education a long time ago. China, the first thing that they did was to have universal education. Our education is today about 80%. It's not universal yet. It was 74% when I was a minister in 2014. It's moved up to 79 or 80%. Still not universal education. And the kind of quality of education, you know what it is. I don't have to say that. Asal reports it everything. So this is the wrong path. The mullahs and the masjids and the temples and all that we do are the wrong way to move your people forward. I'm sorry, I have to say that. It's necessary to say that. Because that doesn't empower anybody. It breeds the kind of things that we see today. And all that is being done in my country is photo ops and, and nothing more. And when you come to cultural rights, your cultural rights are enshrined in Article 1626, as far as the denominations are concerned, 26 of the Constitution. You have the right for freedom of religion, to pray the way you want, set up institutions the way you want, subject to only three things: health, morality, and public order. That's all. Those are the only three exceptions under 26 of the Constitution. So your language is your own. And what a beautiful language Urdu is. Beautiful language. Fortunately or unfortunately, when I was born this side of the border in 1948, but all my brothers and sisters and my parents were fluently spoke the language. In fact, when I went to Chandigarh, which is my hometown, in the evening it was only Shairi and nothing else. Which is Ghalib or Iqbal or whoever it was. And my father was a personal friend of many of these poets. So that's how we were built. And, there were no problems at all. But suddenly we're finding the language. मंजिल पे पहुंच के करूंगा क्या, वहां से वापस भी आना लाज़मी है। मंजिल पे पहुंच के करूंगा क्या, वहां से वापस भी आना लाज़मी है। ऐसा नशा के छोड़कर करूंगा क्या, ऐसा नशा के छोड़कर करूंगा क्या, महकाने का दोस्ताना लाज़मी है। दूर होकर भी पता करूंगा क्या कि तुम पाकिस्तान चले जाओ, दूर होकर भी पता करूंगा क्या, तेरे शहर में घर बसाना लाज़मी है। मेरे शहर में घर बसाना लाज़मी है। अपना बना के तूने अब ठुकरा दिया, फिर भी तुझको अपना बनाना लाज़मी है। फिर भी तुझको अपना बनाना लाज़मी है। गली गली में जो आग जल रही है, उस आग को हमें बुझाना लाज़मी है। खुदा के वास्ते इस दहशती को छोड़ दे, ये गुलसिता उजाड़ना क्या लाज़मी है।